Entertainah, talking sports.
What is going on, Hoops fans? Back at it with another New York Knicks video. And in this video, we're going to preview the first round playoff series between the New York Knicks and the Atlanta Hawks. I still can't believe I'm saying that. If you would have told me at the beginning of the year the New York Knicks were going to be in the playoffs, let alone have a first round home series, we're starting the series at home in the 4-5 matchup, I would have called you a lunatic. Most people had the Knicks penciled in to win 20 to 25 games. They ended up winning 41, double what they were initially projected, and I still have goosebumps just thinking about getting to watch the New York Knicks in the playoffs, and it's going to be starting Sunday. It'll be here before you know it, but I think it's important for the Knicks to be able to get some rest before this series. Before we jump into the matchup, just want to let everybody know I will be live Thursday. Going to try to do a lot more Knicks content during the playoffs and in the offseason for you guys. Midday, 2 o'clock, and I have some of my favorite New York Knicks content creators on the channel along with me. We're going to be live for about 90 minutes. CK2K, I've worked with him before. I think he's a tremendous video maker. I'm very curious to get his thoughts on the series. In addition to him, JD Sports Talk, who's been a long-time subscriber of mine and is doing a great job over there on his new channel. He's going to come on. We're going to talk some New York Knicks basketball, and we're going to talk about the first-round matchup with the Atlanta Hawks. And what a year it's been. But as a Knicks fan at this point in time, I have expectations, and I can't believe I'm saying that. And it's been a great year regardless. We've seen great growth regardless. RJ Barrett's taken a big step up. Julius Randle took a huge step up. We got great contributions from free agent acquisitions we made this year, which we'll talk about in the offseason, who they're going to bring back and who they're not. Emmanuel quickly, even Obi Toppin is starting to progress a little bit throughout his rookie year. But we're here now. We have a first-round home playoff series. I expect a win, and I think it's going to be a great series. By no means do I think the Atlanta Hawks are a pushover. As a matter of fact, Vegas has them as a slight favorite. I think by far this was the best team that the New York Knicks could possibly match up with, and it's no disrespect to the Atlanta Hawks. I think the Atlanta Hawks are a very good team, and we're going to go over some of the reasons as to why I feel that way throughout this video when we talk about the matchup. But I think they're a very good team. By no means do I think this will be an easy matchup. The Knicks and Hawks have only met twice in the playoffs throughout their entirety of their history. Once in the 70s, the last matchup was in 99, in which the Knicks swept the Hawks en route to making the NBA Finals before losing to the Spurs in 5 games. But the reason that I think we match up well with the Atlanta Hawks, couple of things. First thing I want to talk about is lack of experience. You know, going in as a Knicks fan, you got to look at that, right? We're not a team that's been to the playoffs a lot, and we're getting to play another team who has not really been to the playoffs a lot. When you look at this Hawks roster, as talented as it may be, they really only have one significant player that has any playoff experience, and that's Clint Capella. And he's definitely going to be a mismatch nightmare for the New York Knicks. We'll talk about that throughout this video. And the Knicks, you know, we got a good blend. We got seasoned vets. We got young rookies. Randle doesn't have playoff experience, but you got guys like Burks, who's been there before. Of course, Taj Gibson, and of course, Derrick Rose, who's been tremendous for this New York Knicks basketball team. But I thought that was good that we didn't match up with, say, a team like the Miami Heat, who is just a year removed from going to the NBA Finals, have a tremendous battle-tested head coach in Eric Spoelstra. So I thought it was a good matchup from that aspect. Not to mention, we played the Hawks 3 times this year. The New York Knicks won all 3. But you can't just judge it that way. The Hawks were banged up, especially in that last matchup. But Trae Young did play in all 3 contests. And I think we match up fairly well. But I also think there's a lot of similarities between these teams in terms of the style of play. Both teams finished very hot. And since Nate McMillan has taken over as the head coach for the Atlanta Hawks, they've been one of the best teams in the NBA. 27-11 over that 38-game stretch since McMillan's become the head coach. When he took over, they were under 500. They ended up with the same record as the New York Knicks, 10 games over 500. In which he obviously had a ton to do with. He changed the offensive philosophy from things that I've read. Bogdanovich was huge. When you look at Bogdanovich's numbers, he's a big X factor in this series, but under McMillan, he really took a big step forward. Out of his last 16 contests, 12 of them, he scored over 20 points, and he did it in a very efficient way. He's a very good three-point shooter. But when I look at the Hawks and some of the similarities, we have identical records, not just overall, in which both teams went 41-31. We have the same home and the same road record. The Knicks and the Hawks were both 25-11 at home. They were both 16-20 on the road, which makes it even more important that the Knicks got home court advantage in this series. 14 games over 500 at home, 4 games under on the road. Both teams struggle on the road. Both teams are very good at home. So the Knicks, I think it's important that they get that extra home game. It's imperative in a series like this for a young team like the Knicks, who are much better at home than on the road, to be able to get it. And much like the Hawks, the Knicks are equally hot. The Knicks finished the year winning 16 of their last 20 contests. They went 16-4 over that span. Their only losses, 2 of them came to Phoenix, one of which they played them all the way down to the wire, the other one in which they had the lead at the tail end of the third quarter, and then the team kind of wore down. The Denver Nuggets, who we got blown out in the first quarter when Jokic put up 24, and then the LA Lakers, which we lost in overtime. Outside of that, we had some impressive wins. We beat the Lakers. We won against the LA Clippers on the road. We swept Memphis two games during that 20-game stretch. And we had a couple of other Atlanta Hawks as well. We had a couple of other impressive victories over that stand. Now, the Knicks definitely wore down towards the end. Even though they won their last 3 home games, they blew 2 near 20-point leads. The last 2 games, they actually had to go to overtime against the Hornets in one of them. And they narrowly beat the Spurs before just barely beating the Boston Celtics, who were sitting like their top 6 players in that contest. Now, I personally think the Knicks were wearing down in that game. It was a back-to-back. They had played a number of games in a row. Randle had played like 50 minutes the game before that went to overtime. So I think they were running on fumes, and I think that's what allowed the Celtics to come back, which is great that the New York Knicks are not playing until Sunday, because now we're going to have 6 days to recharge the batteries and get ready to go full throttle against this Atlanta Hawks team. Some of the other similarities that I see with this team is the Atlanta Hawks are good in terms of not turning over the basketball. The Knicks, I've talked about this in my prior video, were second in the NBA since the All-Star break in terms of fewest turnovers. They were really good in that department. I think they were 17th over the first half. The Hawks for the year only turned it over the 9th most times in the NBA. So they're good in terms of holding on to the basketball. And much like the Knicks, they play with a similar pace of play. One thing that the Knicks do, and I think it's good for playoff basketball, the same can be said for the Hawks, is they play at a slower pace. They don't get that many possessions. They have the fewest possessions in the NBA at 99.8 per contest. The Knicks rank 30th there. But what that does is it limits the damage done to the defense. It keeps them rested. It's why the Knicks rank first in field goal percentage against, 3-point percentage against, and total points against this year because of the pace of play on the offensive end. Well, the Hawks rank 23rd in that aspect, so they slow down the pace as well. Both teams, I think, do a good job in terms of moving the ball around and creating open 3-point opportunities, and that is probably going to be the biggest key to this series. The Knicks role players, the Reggie Bullocks of the world, the Alec Burkses of the world, have to be able to knock down those open threes. There's no denying it. There's no doubt about it. Now, I don't really worry about the Hawks from a defensive standpoint. I think the Knicks are going to be able to score. I really do. The question is, are they going to be able to hold Trae Young in check? Clint Capella is a huge mismatch nightmare for this team. The Knicks, if you watch them on a nightly basis, they struggle on the offensive glass. The Hawks this year ranked as the 7th best team in terms of offensive rebounding. And Capella, obviously the primary reason. He led the league in rebounding this year. He averaged almost 15 rebounds a game. And he's a beast on the board. And he's definitely going to be a mismatch for the New York Knicks in that area. And I expect the Hawks to try to feature him throughout the series. The interesting part with Trae Young and the rotations from the New York Knicks, I think both these teams have very deep benches. One question that I ask myself, and I've seen a lot of New York Knicks fans asking, are you going to use Frank Ntilikina situationally? Of course, Elfrid Payton is not the most popular Knick in the world, and you really started to see Payton wear down over the course of the season. I try to be fair with Payton. I actually thought he had a decent 10 to 15 game spurt, but over the last 10 games, 15 games, he completely wore out, and he fell out of favor with Thibodeau. He's only getting about 15 minutes a game. Now, I expect him to start because that's the way the rotations have been the entire year. I don't see Thibodeau wanting to mess with that going into the playoffs. But do you use Ntilikina a little bit more than you have throughout the year due to the fact of his defensive ability to possibly give fits to Trae Young late in the basketball game? So I think that'll be interesting how he decides to pick and choose with his rotation, with his lineup. Do they shrink it to an 8-man rotation? The Knicks bench has probably been the strongest part of this team. It's really where we've been able to take advantage of a lot of these teams over this stretch. Quickly's been in double digits. Rose has been in double digits. Alec Burks has been huge down the stretch of these basketball games. But does Toppin fall out of the rotation? Maybe we shrink it down to 8 or 9. We'll see how the New York Knicks feel like they match up with this team. But when you look at the Hawks lineup, they could all score the basketball. Bogdanovich averaged 16 points, but like I said, since McMillan's taken over, he's really taken a major step up, and he's a great three-point shooter. He shot 44% for the year. Of course, you got Trae Young, 25 points, 9 assists. Now, against the Knicks, he did struggle. In the 3 contests against the Knicks, he shot a combined 21 for 58 for only 36% from the floor. So the Knicks did a good job when they went up against Trae Young this year. Now, where he's going to thrive and where this team thrives is getting to the charity stripe. We all know that. Trae Young is great at drawing fouls. It's annoying. It's going to be annoying throughout the entire series. He averages 9 free throws a game in terms of attempts. And the team as a whole was 4th in free throw attempts in the NBA, and they're 5th in terms of percentage, which when you factor in the lack of possessions, they only average the 23rd most possessions in the NBA, yet they draw the 4th most free throw opportunities. Goes a long way, and they're very good at that. They have a knack for that. That's going to be a key to this series. The New York Knicks cannot get killed in terms of the free throw discrepancy. You don't want to give them easy points. But the home court advantage, I think, will go a long way for the Knicks. They've won 11 out of their last 12 at the Garden, and as good as the Hawks were down the stretch, 27-11 over those 38 contests with McMillan, they lost their last 5 road games, including, I believe, 1 game against the New York Knicks. The rest of the starting lineup for the Hawks rounds out with Capella, as I've said, 15 points, 14 rebounds, led the league, 2 blocks. Collins, 18.7 rebounds, 40% from 3, and Kevin Huerter. Off the bench, they got DeAndre Hunter, who's a talented player. He's kind of been banged up throughout the year, but he played the last 3 contests. Sweet Lou Williams, he's a veteran. He has playoff experience. Don't expect him to get a ton of minutes. I think he's about 34, 35 years old. Wasn't getting a ton of minutes for the Hawks down the stretch. A former New York Knick and Danilo Gallinari. Cam Reddish, a former Duke teammate of R.J. Barrett and Tony Snell. I think as an overall bench, I think it's pretty close. I think both these teams are pretty deep, and it'll be interesting to see how deep they cut into their benches. But the Hawks could score in a lot of different ways. The way the Knicks have been winning basketball games over the stretch, outside of the defense, which is obvious, has been the three-point shooting. And that needs to continue throughout the playoffs that the Knicks intend to win. We know that they don't put up a ton of threes, but when they do, they've been very efficient. The Knicks' three-point shooting, in 22 of their first 32 games, they shot under 40% from 3. Just to kind of highlight how much they've grown from that area. 14 out of the next 40, they shot under 40% from 3. So in their first 32, 22 of them they shot under. In their next 40, only 14. 26 out of their 40 games down the stretch, they've been over 40%, where only 10 out of their first 32, they were over 40%. And that has been, in my opinion, the biggest contributing factor as to why this Knicks team was able to have as good of a second half as they did. And that starts with the ball movement, creating open opportunities for everybody on the floor. 26 games, they were 40 plus. 23 out of their 31 losses, they shot under 40% from 3. So that'll be a huge key, right? They have to be able to shoot over 40% from 3, in my opinion, to be able to win this series. 14 times this year, the Knicks shot over 50% from 3, and 2 of those contests were against the Atlanta Hawks. In their 3 games against the Hawks, 2 of them, they shot over 50% from 3. So they showed the ability to be able to create open shots. I think the Knicks are going to be able to get shots. I think they're going to be able to score at will. And I think this series is going to go the distance. I really do. I think we're getting a 7-game series. And as a Knicks fan, I hope not. I'd like them to be as rested as possible if we get into the second round and end up playing Philadelphia. That'll be a tough matchup, but I'm not even thinking about it right now. It's 1 game at a time, but this Hawks team is not a pushover. They're very tough at home. I think they're going to push the Knicks to the limit, but it is so important for the Knicks to get off to a good start in this series. They have young players, a young team that has never been in this spot before. I think they got to at least win the first game, and obviously you want to win those first 2 before you head off to Atlanta. But the first game is so big for the Knicks. There is a lot of pressure on them, being that they got home court advantage at the Garden. They've had 5 or 6 days to prepare. They should win their first 2 games against the Atlanta Hawks, and I think if they do that, they will ultimately win this series. If they split, it gets a lot more dicey, headed into Atlanta, where they are very good in terms of the home court advantage. But we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. I think there's a lot of similarities here, like I said. I think these teams, and obviously they have their differences. Like Trae Young is the best scorer on the court. There's no doubt about it. he's a guy that could put up 50 points on any given night. They're going to have to hold him in check. And Capella, to me, is a huge X factor along with Bogdanovich. That's the guy I probably worry about most. Like, I know Young's going to get his points. I know Capella's going to get his rebounds. We can't get killed by the secondary options. And we'll see what Thibodeau and the Knicks draw up defensively against this Atlanta Hawks offense. But regardless, I think this was the best possible matchup the New York Knicks could have asked for. And in the end, I think we're going to win. But I think it goes 7. I think they wrap it up at the Garden before we head to Philadelphia in the second round. I just can't wait to see how it all plays out, though. Sunday will be game 1. I'll be calling it on the channel. Hopefully, I get to see a lot of you guys over here. Thank you guys for being the best supporters on YouTube, and hopefully I get to see a lot of you guys on Thursday as well. As always, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.